Hi there, Aaron Walter here. If you're hearing this, you're not currently on our premium subscriber feed. Design Better premium subscribers enjoy weekly episodes, 4 episodes per month in total, rather than 2, all ad-free and invitations to our monthly AMAs with the smartest folks in design and tech. You'll hear a preview of this episode, but if you'd like to hear the full conversation, please consider becoming a premium subscriber at designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe. It's just $7 a month, and it supports not only your personal growth, it also makes our work at Design Better possible. The podcast is available to everyone through our scholarship program. If you can't afford a subscription, email us at subscriptions@thecuriositydepartment.com, and we'll help you out.
We do know from the research that we are good at creative thinking, creative problem solving, original thinking. Like that kind of space is very ADHD. We're good at saying, okay, well, if you take this idea and you put them together, you come up with something completely different. And so it's hard not to see how that would be an advantage.
We've talked with people across many creative disciplines on Design Better over the years, and there's a red thread that keeps popping up. Many creative people are neurodivergent in some way. A diagnosis of ADHD in childhood can seem like a disadvantage, but it can actually become a superpower that enables hyper-focus and deep learning. We wanted to learn more about ADHD, so we called in an expert, Skye Waterson.
Skye received a surprise ADHD diagnosis herself at the beginning of her PhD program, which led her to research and develop strategies to help other adults with ADHD reach their potential. Now she has an international business called the Unconventional Organization, which supports more than 800 professionals with ADHD. We spoke with Skye about some common challenges that people with ADHD face at work, why the modern work environment does not always work for ADHD thinkers, as well as some communication strategies for collaborating with neurodiverse people in your own work. This is Design Better, where we explore creativity at the intersection of design and technology. I'm Eli Woolery.
And I'm Aaron Walter. You can get ad-free episodes, bonus content, discounted workshops, and access to our monthly AMAs with big names in design and tech by becoming a Design Better premium subscriber. It's also the best way to support the show. Visit designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe to learn more. We'll return to the conversation after this quick break. It's time for a coffee break, and we're here with our pal, Will Schertz from Methodical Coffee, co-founder and master roaster. Will, so if we're thinking about different ways to brew coffee, what should we think about? How could we do this? And what are the best ways to brew coffee?
Yes. Okay. So you got your whole beans, you got your coffee brewer. There are so many ways to brew coffee easily. First of all, you have to make sure you have good coffee. Shameless little plug that if you go to methodicalcoffee.com, we have a vast array of offerings that you could choose from. But then you got your whole bean coffee, and then now you have to decide, do you want filter coffee, manual brew, or espresso? If you're going to brew coffee by hand, or if you're going to put coffee in a coffee pot, my general ratio is a 16-to-1 ratio. 16 parts water, 1 part coffee. The way that you would do that really quickly is if you have a gram scale, that's fantastic, because then weigh out 20 grams of coffee, multiply that by 16, and that's the amount of water that you need to pour over that coffee to have a even 16-to-1 ratio for your coffee. If you have an espresso maker at home, my favorite recipe for espresso is just a classic 2-to-1 ratio. And I try to get my extraction between 25 and 35 seconds. So however much coffee you're putting in that portafilter, pull double the amount of espresso out and try to do that in 25 or 35 seconds. But we have plenty of videos and tutorials on our website about how to brew coffee, what kind of equipment you're using and what specs you want to be looking out for. If you go to methodicalcoffee.com and look at our blog, it's in the learning section of the site. But essentially, gotta have your coffee beans, gotta have a coffee grinder and a brewing vessel. And then after that, For brewed coffee, focus on that 16:1 ratio with a brew time, I would say roughly about 4 minutes. And for espresso, focus on that 2:1 ratio and extraction time of 25 to 35 seconds. I keep that recipe as I brew coffee. And for me, the easiest way to adjust for flavor is just by slightly adjusting your grind size on your coffee grinder and seeing what the result is. And it's kind of fun to learn how to dial in on your coffee grinder. Dialing in is also another tutorial that we have on our website.
Fantastic. Will, that's great. Methodicalcoffee.com to learn more about methodical coffees, learn more about brewing, and Will has wonderful brewing guides up there. Learn more about methodical coffee and get some tips on how to brew the best cup of coffee at methodicalcoffee.com. Web designers, this one's for you. I've got 1 minute to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things that you can do from start to finish in 1 minute or less on Studio. You can adapt your designs for every device using responsive AI, reuse assets like templates, widgets, sections, and design libraries across sites and share them with your team. Switch up the styling of hundreds of web pages. That means fonts, layouts, colors, all in a click. Add no-code animations and gradient backgrounds right in the editor. Export your designs from Figma to Wix Studio in just a click. Oh, and one more big one. Package and deliver everything your client needs in one smooth handover. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. And now, back to the show. Skye Waterson, welcome to the Design Better podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Skye, you are an expert in ADHD and you coach and support a lot of folks to help them develop strategies to use their ADHD and just be more aware of how their mind works so their careers can go in the direction that they want them to go. And you run an organization called Unconventional Organization. Maybe you could just give us a quick overview of what you do.
Yeah, so we have recently kind of focused in what we do. So this is a good question. We help professionals who've been late diagnosed with ADHD manage their overwhelm, essentially. So particularly focusing in on people who are professionals and who also have that late diagnosis, because I know that is so common. It was for me as well.
Yeah, tell us about your story. You were a PhD student and you got a surprise diagnosis that you too have ADHD.
Yeah, so I finished my master's and I took a year off and I knew there was something going on. I had some feedback that maybe I had dyslexia or something was happening. And so I went to the Inclusive Learning Center, which I was really lucky to have. And I just sort of said, do I have something? Test me. And they did. They did a whole battery of different tests over a couple of days. And they came back and they said, hey, I don't know about the dyslexia, but, it definitely seems like you have ADHD. You should go get tested for that. And that was a real surprise because I'd studied, psychology and even taught human development. But ADHD, when I was, there, it was very much something kids had. We didn't really talk about it as much with adults.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about how that sort of manifested for you, what the diagnosis, that initial diagnosis, kind of what you went through during that period, and then what that led you to in the pivot in your career.
Yeah, I think for me, how it came through was very much around, I was always going, so I have combined type ADHD. So I've got that driven by a motor type. So I was always going in a direction, but the direction was kind of switching a lot. I was one of those people who couldn't, stick with one space. And one of the reasons for it was because I felt like whenever something wasn't working, it was because I wasn't in the right industry or the right area or the right subject. And so I would spend a lot of time, burning myself out essentially. And this is something I see before with other people, is like in that burnout cycle. And so when I found out I had ADHD, it was a huge revelation and a good opportunity for me to look at what ADHD was. And as I'm an academic, I did have access to the research. So I was able to start sort of doing my own independent research into that area to see what's going on. And that helped a lot with removing a lot of the excessive organizational systems that weren't really serving me, but I just like felt like maybe they had been serving me, and also to reduce that burnout. So I haven't actually burned out since I got the diagnosis, which was amazing.
Are there a variety of traits that show up with folks with ADHD? I ask because there are certainly people in my family who have ADHD, and there's like a fast brain trait, which is sort of like hyper processing. Sometimes there's a fixation on particular things that can manifest. It's not always the typical thing of like, hey, I can't focus on one thing at once. Sometimes it's super focus.
Yeah, that hyperfocus for sure. It's interesting. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. I mean, the first thing we'll say is that with ADHD, all of these things have to be persistent and pervasive. That's the key, because everyone will experience this sometimes, but if it's persistent and it's pervasive across all different areas of your life, that's kind of what you're looking for. And then within that, what we particularly focus in on is the executive functioning struggles. So if you're struggling with time blindness, which I really only learned about when I got diagnosed, this concept that you struggle to sense time passing, to see time essentially, working memory struggles. You might have a good long-term memory. You might be able to talk for ages about your topic of interest. But if someone says like, oh, hey, before you go, can you just grab that thing when you get back? And you're like, nope, it's gone. That's a working memory. And then, transitioning between multiple meetings during the day, versus needing those bigger spans of time. Things like that are particularly where we start to see people struggling with ADHD.
Skye, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about some common challenges that your clients face at work and how you help them address those challenges.
I tend to work with 3 types of people: academics, people in the creative field, and tech people. Those are kind of the 3 that come. And so when we're talking about, the struggles people have, there's 2 main issues that people struggle with. One is a lack of flexibility in the workplace. So the more the workplace imposes a system and there's a lack of flexibility, the harder it is. So that could be you're not allowed to download your own apps. You have to use the system. You're not allowed to use Google Calendar. You have to use Outlook Calendar. You're not allowed to come in at a certain time. Any of those systematic structures can make it hard with ADHD, because we often need something that's not totally different, but just slightly adjusted. And then the other part is when you don't get to use your strengths. So you're basically spending your whole day sort of fighting against your weaknesses around admin and those sort of.
If you'd like to continue listening to this conversation, you'll need to subscribe at designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe. Once you do, you'll get access to every full-length episode, all ad-free, monthly AMAs with inspiring people in design and tech, and recordings of all our past AMAs. The podcast is available to everyone through our scholarship program. If you can't afford a subscription, just email us at subscriptions@thecuriositydepartment.com and we'll help you out. Your support makes design better possible. Invest in yourself and the design community by subscribing at designbetterpodcast.com.